Cannabis seems to be everywhere these days, right? It's more accessible than ever, and that's got a lot of people curious about its effects and what it really takes to stop. So today, we're diving deep into the science of what actually happens to your brain and body when you quit. Let's start the clock on this 28-day journey and find out.
First off, let's just get a sense of the scale here. A staggering 55 million Americans now use marijuana. With dispensaries on every corner and THC-infused drinks you can get delivered right to your door, cannabis is really being sold as just a harmless part of modern life.
But this brings up a huge question. If it's so common, why can quitting be such a massive challenge? A recent survey actually found that over 4% of Americans have tried and failed to quit at least 6 times. Look, this isn't just about willpower. There's a real biological process at play here, and we're about to break it all down day by day.
Okay, so the journey begins the moment you stop. In these first 72 hours, this is when your body starts to notice the change, and for a lot of people, this is when the very first signs of withdrawal start to show up.
And this isn't just a feeling people have. A massive meta-analysis looking at over 23,000 people found that nearly half, we're talking 47%, experience at least 3 distinct withdrawal symptoms. And the risk? It's directly tied to how much you use. A daily user is probably going to have a tougher time than someone who just partakes every now and then.
So what do these symptoms actually look like? Well, they can be physical, things like nausea and headaches, but man, they're often psychological. From feeling down to sudden anger. 2 of the most common complaints, though, are the ones that happen when you're not even awake, having a really hard time sleeping and having intensely strange dreams.
The first few days tend to follow a pretty predictable pattern. Symptoms often kick in on day 1, get more intense on day 2, and then those feelings of irritability and anxiety, they usually hit their peak by day 3. But what's really interesting is that just as your mood might start to even out, the sleep problems and weird dreams can actually get worse.
All right, let's talk about day 4. This is a real turning point. We're going to shift from just talking about symptoms to the amazing physiological changes that start happening inside your brain. Your body literally begins its reboot sequence. To get what this reboot is all about, we need to talk about a natural neurotransmitter called anandamide. THC, the main psychoactive compound in weed, is basically a master mimic. It fits into the exact same receptors as anandamide, but its effect is way more powerful. It magnifies your thoughts, your imagination, your perception. So here's the key takeaway. When you regularly flood your brain with THC, your brain tries to create balance. It adapts by actually reducing its own cannabinoid receptors. It's a process called downregulation. Basically, your brain becomes less sensitive, which is exactly why your tolerance builds up and quitting becomes so much harder. Now, this downregulation has a pretty subtle but powerful effect. THC impacts the neurons that are involved in how we experience novelty, that feeling of newness. It's why doing a boring task can feel super exciting when you're high. But as your brain adapts, it gets harder and harder to feel that same sense of wonder or bliss from new experiences when you're sober.
As our source puts it, with a down-regulated system, even seeing the Eiffel Tower for the first time might just feel underwhelming. That natural sense of awe just gets kind of dampened.
But here's the good news. Your brain is incredibly resilient. By just day 4 of quitting, those CB1 receptors, the very ones that were turned down, have likely started returning to their normal baseline function. It's a remarkably fast recovery, really. Okay, so your brain is healing, which is fantastic, but we are now entering what the data shows is the single biggest hurdle in this whole journey. Let's talk about the critical peak. You're going to want to mark these days on your calendar. Statistically, if someone is going to fail in their attempt to quit, it is most likely going to happen between day 5 and day 7. This is the period that requires the most focus and the most resolve. This period is especially tough for those with what's called marijuana dependence. And that's not just a label. It's defined as continuing to use despite negative consequences, or having a history of long-term use with multiple failed attempts to get past this exact 1-week mark. Now, it's really important to have some perspective here. While scientists totally agree marijuana dependence is real, they also generally agree it's less severe than dependence on substances like alcohol or opiates. But less severe doesn't mean it isn't a huge challenge for the person going through it.
So why is this window so tough? Well, it's often when social rituals and triggers hit the hardest. The work week ends, the weekend's here, and that old routine of relaxing with a movie while high just kicks in. It's these ingrained habits that make days 5 through 7 the ultimate test. And this is exactly where replacing that ritual with a new one, like a walk, a call with a friend, or a new hobby, can be absolutely crucial. But for anyone who pushes through that critical peak, the rewards are waiting. The physical symptoms, they usually fade during that second week, though, yeah, the psychological cravings can linger. So let's fast forward to the 1-month mark, where the body and brain have pretty much reset.
If you make it to day 28, you have hit a major milestone. By this point, pretty much all of the withdrawal symptoms will have disappeared. Your endocannabinoid system and those super important CB1 receptors have returned to their baseline. Your body has successfully recalibrated itself.
Before we wrap up, there is one incredibly important factor we have to consider that changes the entire equation, and that's age. The impact of cannabis is just not the same for every brain.
This is absolutely critical to understand. While an adult brain can return to baseline pretty quickly, using marijuana during adolescent development is a whole different story. It can create long-term and potentially permanent changes because the brain is still, well, it's still under construction.
The host of our source video actually shared his own experience. He started using cannabis as a teenager. And he reflects on this very point, wondering if the social comfort it gave him back then was worth the potential long-term damage to his developing brain. It's a really powerful and personal question to think about.
Ultimately, the goal here isn't to lecture anybody, it's to illuminate. Understanding the science, knowing what's happening inside your own brain, and what you can expect on this journey, that's what gives you the power to make informed choices for your own life.
And that brings us to our final question. Now that you've seen the science, from the initial withdrawal and that brain reboot, to the critical peak and the final return to baseline, you're way better equipped to answer, what is the right choice for you?